Hey everybody, we're live. I'm Lelia from One More Page Books. I'm so excited to be welcoming everyone to these fabulous authors. So thanks so much for joining us if you're here. Thanks so much for watching later if you're tuning into this after the actual event. Hopefully the world's still here tomorrow. We don't know what the future holds. So like I said, I'm Lelia from One More Page Books. I'm a huge fan of both of these authors, so I'm just so excited to be to have them talk about some of their new books. But I do want to take a second to talk about their older books, and if you are so inclined and you want to go back and do the full readathon, I highly recommend it on both counts. So I am joined here by Diana Peterfreund, who is on my left. So she's written about everything from secret societies, killer unicorns, Cold War era bunkers. Let's see, what about, and my personal favorite, post-apocalyptic adaptation of a Jane Austen novel. And it's not Pride and Prejudice, it's Persuasion, which, fun fact, is why I read Persuasion, because I read that book and I loved it so much.
Really?
Where Darkness Shows the Stars. Yeah. And then I read Persuasion and I was like, guys, Persuasion is low-key awesome. Like, Pride and Prejudice is great, don't get me wrong, but Persuasion is fabulous. So in any case, go back and read those. She's written so that's everything from middle grade, her series, the Omega City series, if you're into the Goonies, sort of like a Westing game vibe, you want to get into that series, highly recommend. She's written young adult and also written for adult well. So her newest series, the paperback of book 1, comes out on the 22nd, and that is based on Clue. Yeah, so it's really fun, murder mystery, prep school. If you are a fan of the board game or a fan of the cult classic film Clue, highly recommend those. And then the sequel comes out October 27th, I believe.
13th.
Oh, sorry? Yeah?
13th.
13th. Oh, man, sorry. What is time? What a date. And that is In the Study with the Wrench. So you can pre-order that now. Obviously, everybody, get it together. Let's go. And then on my far left, you'll have Jon Skovron, who also has written for so many different age groups. You guys are both so have such range in your writing. I think it's really amazing and how you guys have done that over the course of your writing careers. So Jon's written a young adult Frankenstein retelling, so I think those are paired so well, Austen and Frankenstein, called Man-Made Boy. And the sequel.
It's more of a like a sequel than a retelling.
Yes,
really.
Yeah, retelling is not accurate. It's just got a little something in it, and then something
Connected work.
Yes, and other literary references as well, which I think is phenomenal. I love the way you pulled them all together, especially in the sequel. So. Yeah, and then he's also written for adult fantasy. His oh my god, Hope and Red, so good. It's seriously one of the most unique and funniest fantasy novels I've read in memory. It's so good, you guys. Everyone should read it. So that's a trilogy. Go read that, and then Ranger of Mars.
Or you can also listen to the podcast. There's a serialized podcast Orbit's putting out, spoken by me. So. They basically took the audiobook that I did, chopped it up into episodes, and they're releasing one a week for the next, I don't know how many weeks. But yeah.
That's really cool, and I saw that you read the audiobook, and you are obviously an excellent speaker. You have a theater background, so I think that's really cool that they could take advantage of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, highly recommend that. And then, so Ranger of Marzana came out in April. That's a new series that you have, adult fantasy. And then today we're going to talk about your new middle grade novel, The Hacker's Key, which is sort of cyber dystopian thriller. Oh, look at that. There it is. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, you guys have known each other for several years of writing for all these different age groups, different publishers, different genres. I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about just anything. And also, if you guys want to stray out of books and talk about TV, music, whatever, comes to your heart.
We never do that. What are you talking about?
I know. You what, never. I don't, especially if you want to talk about that time that Diana met Jason Doering from Veronica Mars. I think that's my personal favorite story. But, wherever the night goes.
Wherever the night goes.
I'm going to bow out, but if we were in the store, we would all give a huge round of applause right now for you guys and for all the amazing years of work you've done. And thank you for writing awesome books. And I'll let you take it away if I can figure out how to leave from this video.
All right. Hey, Jon.
Hey. You know what? Do I look at the camera so that it looks like I look in your eyes, or how? What do you want to do?
Or should we just? Man, let's do our best. I'm just gonna look at like the image of you, so I don't feel like a robot talking into like half.
Right? That's always the thing.
So we're here to celebrate the release of Hacker's Key, which I finished today. It is super fresh in my mind. It is a stunning, fast-paced thrill ride. It's like a spy thriller for kids. It was like reading like James Bond or Mission Impossible or something like that. It was really wild, and there's climbing up cliffs, and there's scuba diving, and there's like running around on the top of a train. Like it's just nonstop, and there's beautiful international travel, and it's all very exciting. So why spy thrillers? After everything that you've written, where did you get the idea for this?
Actually, it was kind of a weird, long, and clumsy progression. I talked with my friend David Levithan, who's an editor and author. He's an author and also an editor.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, he's this guy. Maybe, I don't know. There was that book that turned into that movie or whatever. And I'd been talking to him, saying that I wanted to do middle grade for a while, and so we kind of started going back and forth because I kind of knew that I was coming into this as my debut middle grade, and so I was throwing all sorts of weird stuff at him, all over the place, from like far future dystopia to like, weird animal hybrid and more. Just
no, I remember you pitching that to me once. The
middle grade tank girl.
Yeah, the girl. Yeah, that.
What's it? I don't know why.
Do it.
Well, but so it was just kind of a process of elimination, and then what I knew what I wanted to do with this was do something that was like just simple and clean and just like, in part because I'm right now writing this Slavic inspired fantasy trilogy that's just massive in every way. There's over 100 characters with names.
Yeah, that's the Ranger of Marzana for anyone who's listening. So
yeah, and it's in the first book's already out. Second book comes out next April. They just posted the cover a couple of days ago, and it's
gorgeous. It's so
stunning.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's the artist they've gotten to do this is just magnificent.
Very it just reminds me of like all those fantasy novels that I read, when I was like in high school, like these really lush painted covers. They're really nice. Anyway, Hacker's Key.
So, but I wanted to do something really simple, kind of like a diver just going cleanly into the water. That was what I wanted to do. And I've always been a huge fan of spy stuff, and I've never really gotten it. I sort of dig into it a little bit in the Hope and Red books, just like a tiny bit. But like I wanted to do like full on, and I wanted to do kind of a modern day setting. And one of the things that interested me was in doing that, could I make it realistic? Could I use actual science and technology and still have it be exciting and fun and not feel like it was bogged down by all that stuff? Instead of just hand waving like, yes, they just, whatever, it's close enough to realism, but to actually have realistic things happening. So that's kind of where it came from. It was just kind of a slow journey.
It's so funny that you say that, because that was actually one of the rules I made for myself when I started writing Omega City. I was like, okay, this is going to have, elements of like science fiction, but it's going to be all realistic. Like everything in the book either had to exist even in prototype form, or be something, like it didn't, or be something that really existed in the real world. So I didn't want to do anything. I mean, I remember having a discussion when I was writing Infinity Base, which is the third one when they go into the space station. And my editor was like, this lack of gravity is very difficult for the staging of this book. Like, can't you see like the Death Star? They're just like walking around. And I was like, no, it can't. And let me tell you why. So I did want it to exist in the real world. And it's funny because, I always say, they're adventure novels, And Bill Lawhorn, who's like one of the guys in the Washington Science Fiction Association, he read it and he goes, Diana, it's hard sci-fi because everything in it is, real and just like one step.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm not, as knowledgeable about like where the genre lines kind of get.
Right.
you know, I just know what I had made a rule for myself as a writer.
I feel I have it's not so much lack of knowledge, but just as a grand indifference to where the line is between those things. Yeah, so I wanted to include a lot of realistic stuff, and because I thought it would be fun, and the main character there's a lot of things you could say about her, but the one I find the most kind of charming is that she can be in the middle of these like crazy dangerous situations, and yet she's still kind of going, okay, now, you know, and she's running through physics equations in her head as she's like escaping from a prison, to kind of calculate, will we break the gate down with this vehicle? Is that even physically possible?
I mean, I think a reader's going to come away with this with a lot of tips and tricks on
how to like scramble Wi-Fi signals.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of practical information in the book. I mean, it's really interesting to see sort of the way that she solves puzzles and breaks codes. Like, you know, both you and I have a lot of code breaking in the book, and the kids are doing codes that are very challenging codes, but also codes that are realistic for kids their age to be able to break if they know the keys.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to do was I feel like my favorite spy novels, like the old Ian Fleming Bond novels. I think Holly Black once said, you know, they're like half spy novel, half travelogue. And obviously you don't want to get too bogged down to that with a kid's book, but like I wanted it to have that kind of international like feeling to it, and I wanted it to feel like those places were real, and that like maybe the reader has never really thought one way or the other about Iceland, for example, but after reading this book, they'll be like, oh, you know, maybe I want to go to Iceland. Maybe it's actually faster to fly to Iceland from DC than it is to fly to some parts of the US. Which is true. It's cheaper sometimes too. But you know,
to other countries.
Well, when that is able to happen again. Right now, I don't think they'd even let us in. They'd be like, yeah, no. But at the same time, I
read the scene where they're running through. It's Galway, right? And yes. You're like naming all the streets, and it's like, yes. Oh wow, there's like a map. You know, like Ada has a map in her head of where these streets are and how to get from here to there. And you feel it in Baltimore, you feel it in Galway, like.
So I guess because we really haven't like said what this book is really about. But I think it's a marvelous segue.
We just dove into the nitty gritty.
Right into that.
We like repel into the story.
So basically, this character Ada Genet, that's definitely a wink to Jeanpierre Genet. So Ada Genet's father is this infamous thief, hacker, espionage, like. He's a mercenary, but he has his own sort of code. He doesn't kill people. He has a certain way of doing things, but he's absolutely a criminal in every sense of the word. And he has basically raised this girl from infancy, but starting in toddler just by himself. And he's basically groomed her to take over the family business. And about a year before the book starts, they're finally caught, and for I think in my initial proposal I suggested they were caught trying to steal the Declaration of Independence, but you know it doesn't matter. What's important is that they're caught, and the book starts up a year later. The father's been in prison this whole time in like a supermax facility, and she's in this. It's basically like a military academy for wards of the state who are minors and have committed felony offenses. So every kid there is in some way, you know, in deep trouble. And she is not adjusting well. And in part because she doesn't want to adjust. Because her father raised her to be this very kind of like free thinking, like he's French, he's very French. Her mom was American, but her father's very French, kind of Parisian guy. And so he raised her to be this way. And so she's kind of fighting the system. And then what happens is there's this top secret weapon or what have you that's was at a top secret UN facility, and it's been stolen. And all the clues point to her father, who is, of course, in this supermax prison. And so they're trying to pump him for information. He says, I won't tell you, but if you bring my daughter here that I haven't seen in a year, I'll talk to her. And so they reluctantly are like, so they bring her there. And of course, instead of telling her anything, the whole thing was him engineering her escape. And he has basically told her, you will go find this thing, you know, and get it. And she's like, well, what do I do with it? And he's like, that's up to you. And so a lot of the whole book is, of course, just basically her and her friends going to find this thing, the hacker speed.
Let's talk about that for a second. Like, I love this section, you know, in every good sort of spy or heist story, you have the assembly of the team. Right?
Yes, the team.
And she is home free. She is broken out, and you know, you've got her driver ready to take her to, you know, the first stop on her trip, and she's like, nope, we got to go back and get my boy. Like, we got to go back and get Jace, who's like her little hacker friend, because she's like, since this thing involves hacking, and I am just a humble art thief and ninja, like, I need my hacker friend to come in and do all the computer stuff.
Some specialties, you know. I think, you know, she understands where her limits are.
She's really a very brilliant mastermind. You know, she's Danny Ocean and all of that. Like, she's like, okay, you know, I know computers fine, but like, you know, this is pretty serious, so let me go get. And I thought throughout the book it was a really great thing where you kept seeing that he had this skill, but unlike the other people in the book, he's not necessarily a spy. You know, when she's taking down like 5 operatives at a time, and he's like hiding behind a rock, you know. He gets on just the coding thing. You know, it's not tough. It's just he doesn't know hand-to-hand fighting. Like, what's this all about? Like, I love that.
And Jace also he fills a really important role, which is in a lot of ways he is the reader's. The one the reader relates to the most, because I mean, he got into some trouble because he did some hacking. He basically he brought down half of the power grid in Baltimore just to hack into his school's like server and fix his grades. And didn't really think like
Lee Miller from Hackers character, right?
He didn't really quite think it all the way through. And so here he is at this place. But he has like no espionage. He's not really a criminal. He's just a guy. He's a really smart guy with a lot of computer knowledge who just didn't think it through. And even so, he's really thoughtful about it all now. And he's like, you know, only now I realize that, like, what if there were hospitals in that power grid, and you know, and they all have like generators, but what if the generator went down? Like, then that's on me. And so he's kind of struggling with his own stuff as Ada kind of keeps pulling him more and more into this world.
And then we have Cody, the glamorous, multilingual, never quite sure what side she's on, like spy in training.
Well, Cody has a whole backstory that is only hinted at in the book, but she's a super complicated character, and I really liked. When I started working on this book, it was a couple of years ago, and one of my sons was still in middle school at that point. They're both in high school now, but and I promised him that I would include references to Super Smash Bros., the video game series, and that I would include references to Dragon Ball. And as much as I love anime, Dragon Ball is not one of the ones that I love particularly. That was always more my kids' thing. But what I do really find fun is this kind of weird friendship / rivalry between Goku and Vegeta. And so with Cody and Ada, I was exploring, and in fact, Jace at one point is like, oh, you guys are like Vegeta and Goku, and they're like, you know, who are these people? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, So I did get to slip that one in there too. But so that's the thing with Cody. Like, even when things are not good between her and Ada, there's a respect there that they learn because they've both been through some really unusual and challenging childhoods.
I think that that's all important. Like, even when you have such a very plot-driven novel like this thriller, that the reason we relate to it as a reader is because of the relationships in the stories. I just read this really great essay by Charlie Jane Anderson about that. Charlie Jane Anders. I'll get it right. About this exact thing, about how like relationships
I knew you were talking about
between characters are these very particular things that like why we like stories, you know, even if these characters are larger than life, that we come back over and over again to the relationships. And like, as I'm writing the third Clue book, I always think to myself, you know, at this point, they all know each other. And so when there's betrayal and murder and things like that, it hurts like so much more than, you know, in the first book when they didn't know each other as
right.
well. And then, you've also got the fact that as you're going through the book, Ada is dealing with, what does my father want from me? Why has he put me in this position? You know, if I fail, have I also failed in like his vision for me and like who I am? And so it's, you know, it really becomes, you know, a very personal story for her, which is great. And I mean, like Omega City, my agent and I used to talk about it, and he was like, well, the reason I really like the story is because, you know, it's about this big bunker and it's larger than life, but it's like also a story about these kids dealing with their parents' divorce. And you know, I always think Goonies, but you used to say it was like E.T. because, you know, E.T. is a story about a boy and an alien, but it's also a story about the family dealing with their father, like abandoning them. And how when you bring it down to these relationships, then, you know, it's like in that Hitchcockian way, the hacker's key is this MacGuffin that tells an entirely different story about Ada.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's one of those things that you could view any number of ways. And incidentally, it is like the hacker's key itself is the only part of the book that's like literally not possible. Like not even a little possible.
You think you might have fixed that, like with Y2K, right? They would have been like, you know what, let's just go in and.
I mean, the idea that there is a surviving source code element to every single technological device in the world is just not feasible. Because there have always been kind of parallel development in platforms. So it's just not possible. But
other things that are real. Let's talk about some of those, because
yes.
I know you must have done some super crazy research to get into the story. You traveled, you ate all the food, you went to all the places.
Conveniently, all of the places they have to go are places I've been. So that's kind of why there's I have an intimate knowledge of all of those places. So that's and I chose them specifically because I didn't have a ton of time for research. So the deadline was fast. And so I picked.
Yeah,
I was like,
well, for you, like boop boop boop, shoo.
Yeah. So there was everywhere that they go are places that I am personally familiar with. But the cool thing about that is that I was able to write about these cool places that I have been, that I feel like, you know, like when I was in Kootenai, and I was like, why has no one ever, like, why have I never heard of the Bone Church before? Like, what? Like, I'm such a kind of an oddly macabre person. You'd think that by this point in my life I would have heard of it, but I hadn't.
Do you know the Bone Chapel in my unicorn books?
No, is there?
Yeah, and it's based.
Is that based on Kootenai?
No, it's based on the Capuchin Bone Chapel, which is in Rome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in Rome. And when I went there and read about it and then visited there, I thought to myself, oh my God, because I already knew that I wanted to put bone magic in the book. And I was doing research, because the book was set in Rome and stuff. And I read about this and I was like, oh my God. So I went to Rome and I saw it. And when I saw it, it looks just like that place in Prague that you were talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
With like so to back up a little, in case anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, there's this town in Czech Republic called Kutná Hora, and they have it's called the Sedlec Ossuary is what it's like. I'd say actual name of it, but it basically there were all these bones from I want to say like they're on the 12th or 13th century, and at some point they all had to be moved, and they just told this guy, they were like, do something nice with it. And he was like, okay. And so I don't think it was really what they had envisioned when they hired him for this project, but he basically took all these human remains and made beautiful sculptures of them. There's like you would never imagine the hip bones of a human being a beautiful flower, but that's exactly what it is. And there are these bone chandeliers, and he even did his own name in bones and like a coat of arms. And there's all this just kind of amazing, and it's all, and you walk into this place and it's just everywhere, like skull garlands and just so much stuff. And it's kind of, I mean, yes, it's macabre, but it's also undeniably beautiful. And just to kind of have that juxtaposition there was something that I just kind of was like, oh, like it was so amazing to me.
It's very stunning in Rome too. It's in the downstairs of this like Capuchin monastery that's been there for, I don't know, 400 years or something. And it was moved from an old Capuchin monastery, and there had been a pauper's cemetery there, and they moved those bones too. And
right.
They recreate scenes from the Bible out of bones. And so like, for instance, the angels would be depicted with like a skeleton, and then sort of the rib bones would make wings and things like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
Like, just like in your ossuary, like they have these like the archways would be made of skulls and things like that. I mean, it's still a working church, and they put all the monks that die, they become part of it. So they put them in the tomb to decompose.
Oh, they let them decompose naturally though. They don't, and then they just check in on them 50 years later to see what's up, or.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if they like deboned them,
I didn't see anything that would be like, I mean, there were monks like in cubicles that were in various and sundry states.
Cubicles?
Well,
I probably have the wrong image in my head here.
The wall. I don't know if cubicle is the right term, but like,
okay, yeah.
Little tombs set in the wall.
Oh, okay, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Okay, all right, yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, okay. And it was really, you're not allowed to take pictures or anything because it's like a holy site, and so you get this idea. You're like, how is this not desecration of the dead? But I think it to this particular order, it's like an honor to become part of this chapel.
Well, for the Sedlec ossuary, it's very much the theme of memento mori, remember that you will die.
Yes.
And it's to kind of remind everyone, they don't hold services in this place anymore. They do have an altar, but they don't hold services there. But the idea is that when you walk in, it is to be confronted with your own mortality. And I found it very effective.
It is very effective. It is very, very effective, and it's a very unusual kind of thing. And I think it's very funny that you saw one and you were like, I gotta put this in a book, and I saw one and I was like, I gotta put this in a book. We have very similar sensibilities. Like Leah was pointing out earlier, we're like, ooh, this is weird and creepy. I'm gonna write about it.
Yeah, we gotta write about that.
But yeah, it's very stunning, because also I think we were talking earlier about how you had your middle grade heroine scuba diving, and I had my middle grade, heroin, scuba diving, and
yes. Which I'm just a pretender though. You've actually been scuba diving.
I have been scuba diving. Yeah, and
I had to ask scuba divers about it, but you went there.
When I was figuring out how old they were, because in Omega City, like Jillian is the main character, and then Eric is her Irish twin younger brother. Like he's only younger than her. I had to figure out how old she was so that he would have been scuba diving while they still had, like, before their father lost all his money, so that like, they could do it, because scuba diving is a cheap hobby. And so I was like trying to figure it out, because he was the one who was super into it. And I based that off of my own brother, who was like, the second he turned, I think it was 11 or 10, which is like when they let you learn to scuba dive, that he was like, we're going scuba diving, like anything sort of aquatic related, the character of Eric was into, just like my brother. So I only learned to scuba dive because my dad and my brother were taking lessons, and I was like, this sounds fun. But when you scuba dive in the springs in Florida and you have to like carry all your old gear like out to it, I was thinking about that when I read the scene where Ada was like exhausted at the end of all of her scuba diving experiences. And spoilers.
She has to scuba dive, and then she has to climb a 700-foot high sheer face.
Do you know that's those are the cliffs that the Cliffs of Insanity were based on in The Princess Bride?
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, those are the cliffs that
was that the actual cliffs in the film? What they filmed?
No, it's like they filmed in like a sound stage, but like I think there were distant shots, and it is the Cliffs of Moher, like, because they did film in Ireland. So I'm mispronouncing that, but you know what I mean.
The Cliffs of Moher. Yeah, I think it's hard to say. We're getting it wrong because we're not Irish.
Right. Those are the cliffs in the distant shots in The Princess Bride, and those are the cliffs that they are based on in the book too. Like that was totally the idea, and they filmed there, and it all worked out. So
yeah, it's I've been to the cliffs, since I've been to all the places in the book, and it's a really kind of intense experience to be right up close. I'm not like super afraid of heights or anything like that. I obviously get that kind of like giddy feeling, but I think that's just the normal human reaction to staring down 700 feet drop. But so the person I was traveling with, though, he was like, can you not be quite that, because there's no handrails, there's no like nothing. No, there's not even like a little rope. There's like nothing. It's just you're there, and people are kind of just hanging out. And I just sat on the edge, and like, my feet hang over the edge.
Fall over, you're an idiot, right?
Well, I mean, I could envision a scenario where there's like a family and the kids are horsing around, but honestly, it's so like daunting. I can't imagine you would actually like be like, whatever, I'm gonna horse around on the edge of a cliff.
Which was also really realistic, where it was like they got off the tour bus and the other people like see them with all these ropes, like diving equipment, and they're just kind of like, not my business. Like having a good
time. Would you say anything? I wouldn't say anything. Crazy Americans.
It is like scary looking, right? Like you look at her and you're like, she's a child ninja. I'm not going to go bother her.
Oh, I've never thought of her that way. That's interesting. I mean, she's dressed as very utilitarian. Like she's pretty no nonsense. If it's more than a picture, she can't be bothered.
Like I think it's like child. Well, because you think
she probably does.
Yeah, that's why they have to be in Europe. Because in America, there'd be some busybody being like, "Where are your parents? Where are your parents?"
That's true. They go everywhere. No one's ever like, "Wait a minute, like who are these random like 12-year-olds running around?"
Child, I will book you and your unaccompanied friends on a sleeper car to Prague.
I mean, money talks. She's just shoving wads of cash at them, and that's it was one nice thing one thing I really indulged in with this is that because of their past history as like international criminals, her father has like a whole series of safe houses all over the world, and in every single house there's like or house or warehouse or apartment, whatever it is for the place, there's like a listing of like local phone numbers. Here's like your local fence, and here's like your local like passport forger, you know, and like just convenient numbers, and like, you know, and of course giant wads of money and like extra ninja gear for her. And so there's like all this stuff, and it's obviously it's a little indulgent because it's like 3 12-year-olds, how would they get around? Well, they would really need a lot of cash and passports. Like that's all they really need. And they have both of those things pretty easily with that. But I also then had to have that, we were talking earlier about the phone number thing. Because I was just trying to think of like what would be a passcode, because all these houses have a passcode. It can't be the same passcode for all the houses because that'd be really easy to crack.
You mean the key, like the number key to let them in the house?
The keypad, yeah.
Yeah.
They each have a keypad, and so, but it would also be impossible for her to memorize, you know, 50 different passcodes. Like that's absurd.
I can't remember the Kuala Lumpur one, but not Baltimore.
Yeah, right. Then until you need the Baltimore one, then you're screwed, right? So it had to be something that was more like a code and a puzzle, in the sense of a sequence predefined by something. And what I ended up using for that was the letters that are on phone keypads, which has like a really kind of weird history that I don't think a lot of people are all that familiar with. Like even to this day, we still have those little letters, even on my iPhone that is like not a real phone. Like, why is it on there? Why does it have this little ABC? You know?
Yeah, we used to have the button phones. If we wanted to text, like we'd have to be like, if you wanted to say I, we'd be like 555.
You had to like scroll through. Yeah. I remember that. I remember being like, why would anyone text? This is such a pain in the ass. But there's a reason that those were put on there at first, and that's because all phone numbers were not just numbers. They were originally letters and numbers based on the phone operator centers that were in the area.
Movies, and they're like Brooklyn 559 or whatever it is.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Brooklyn because that's too long of a word, but it would be like BROO or something like that. And then like a 3 or 4 digit number, probably 4 digit in New York City, but in other places it could have just be 3 digits. So that whole, you know, I mean, I kind of went into that whole, not at length, but you know, I kind of dropped that whole little bit of knowledge.
Than right now.
Right, exactly. It's all like, well, because it's Ada, so she's just kind of like,
it's really doing very well, and I thought it was fascinating because with codes, you do have to think of something, you know, that it's a really brilliant code, and it's something that a 12-year-old reader can grasp really quick. You know, like,
because they still see it on their phone.
The street that you're on and the last 2 letters of the city you're in, you know, and every 12-year-old kid can think that, but then they can also realize that as long as you memorize that, then, you know, you're good to go in any city in the world.
Yeah, and that was the point. The idea was that she didn't have to memorize any one code. She just had to memorize the system.
My middle grade reader is obsessed with codes, and she's always doing the codes, like, and anything that's sort of like code related puzzles in the newspaper every week she's super into, and this would definitely appeal to that kind of code breaking thing. When I was sitting down to write my middle grade, I actually made a list of like all the things I was obsessed with when I was 10. And I was like, I want to put all of these things in the book. So, you know, there was scuba diving, and there was jumping off of high things in the water. You've got that too. There's codes. There's, you know, secret underground lairs. We both have that in the book. Like,
yes,
you know,
yes.
You kind of have to hit each of these things because I think it's sort of a universal experience for kids to, you know, to want to have secrets that they and their friends explore. They want to break codes and puzzles. They want to have, you know, these big adventures. They want to have sort of secret lairs / forts. My kids over the course of the pandemic have built not 1, not 2, but 3 separate forts in like in existence in my 900 square foot apartment. So,
oh wow, that's impressive.
They're really well. They can't go anywhere. They have to turn where we live into a wonderland,
into separate places. Yeah,
right. You can't go to Prague. Like,
it's true. Can't.
So there is this kind of universal, I think, desire for adventure, and you're tapping into that. When you write about these puzzles, and you really watch the kids in your book sort of work them out in very reasonable ways. Like, I really loved watching sort of the problem solving that they went through, like the ways that they sort of escaped. It wasn't all like chokeholds and stuff like that. Like, they used really clever methods to get away from the grown-up and things.
But even with the chokeholds, like I am, and anyone who's read any of my books will know that I am a big lover of a nice little choreographed fight scene. Like, I don't know if I've ever written a book that didn't have at least one extensively choreographed fight scene. Blame it on the childhood of watching Kung Fu on Saturday afternoon reruns. But so I wanted Ada, and of course it would make sense if you were like a giant famous criminal, you would presume that your adorable daughter is probably going to be in danger. You've got two options. You could quit being a world famous criminal, which probably didn't sound too appealing to him, or you could make sure that she can defend herself. So he enlists many other criminals to teach her all of their criminal fighting ways. But she's always been, but she's extremely conscientious about it. And that was something that was really important to me. Every time she enacts violence on anyone, she is thinking it through. She is pondering what are going to be the ramifications, not just to me, but to this person who is in my way or is trying to harm me in some way. But I don't want to like permanently damage. I just want to stop them from harming me.
Yeah, she really does think it through. There's one part where she lays out an entire room full of henchmen, and then she's like, I don't want them to starve to death if I leave them here.
Yeah, so she makes it so they can escape eventually, but not until after she's like already gone.
Yeah, it's very she's very thoughtful. Yeah, she's very thoughtful. And I think that's what makes her, a heroine, and that's what makes her sort of somebody that you can root for, because she's not the first to go to violence. Like, she'd much rather escape than hit somebody.
Yeah. I mean, her thing that she also has kind of like a hero in her mind that she's constantly trying to emulate, and at times will even imagine like, okay, what would she do right now in this situation where she finds herself in that underwater tunnel and she doesn't know which way is up, and she's just completely like freaking, she's on the edge of complete panic, which if you're breathing with a scuba tank is like about the worst thing you could possibly do, is start hyperventilating.
That's true. Yeah, so much of scuba training is actually just, here are all the things that can happen. Here are all the things you do when that happens. And then you train, like you can't find your regulator gets knocked out and you can't find it. Like, how do you move so that like you make sure that it comes back to you, and don't panic. Do this. And
right. Yeah. No, you don't want to panic in a scuba incident.
It's very important. So what is next for Ada? Is there going to be a sequel?
I don't know. My editor and I have been talking about it. I certainly have some ideas. Although Ada, of course, is the protagonist, I feel like that both Jace and Cody have a lot of background to explore, so that it doesn't always have to be about Ada and her parents. It could be.
Yeah, I'd love to see a story about a polyglot, dangerous super spy like Cody.
Yeah. I mean,
it's really glamorous, and me, I love things with lots of dresses in them.
Yeah, Cody is very glamorous and insists on wearing dresses even when it's horribly impractical to do so.
Like on a boat in Iceland.
Yeah, no, still dresses, still only dresses. But yeah, so I would love to explore some of that. That's actually not next what I'm doing for Scholastic though. because I think they kind of wanted to just put this book out there and see how it does before they committed to any more with Ada. So I'm going to be doing something completely different with Scholastic Next. It's going to be a ghost story. So that'll be that's fun. I'm doing some research on that today, actually. Really genuinely terrifying research.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, it's there are certain things that sometimes you don't want to Google. I've been Googling like sort of medical examiner reports on people who've been asphyxiated.
Whoa, yeah, that would get you some unpleasant responses. But you got to turn off that safe search, because otherwise you might miss something important.
Yeah, I had to actually turn off the images because, like, they pop up, and like I'm much more comfortable reading the description and then knowing what I'm going to see than looking at
preparing yourself.
Right, because even though
just being like, right,
like I'm trying to describe a corpse in the book.
Yeah.
But I would like to not have like faces of death kind of, happening.
Yeah, no, right? It can be really troubling. Yeah. There's a huge difference between creating it in your mind, which has like its own automatic sort of like safety features.
Right. I actually have that conversation a lot with the author Mary Mancusi, because she's a huge horror movie fan, and I can't stand horror movies. But I love.
What do you mean?
You didn't know that about?
I didn't know that about you. Can't stand.
No, this is how I
stand them, or you just are frightened of them.
If I have a negative emotional reaction to them, I don't know. Like, how would you?
Fair enough.
So, this is how I watch horror movies, because I actually love horror, and like I read all the horror novels. Like I have next month. So
somebody just like horror.
The horror story that I wrote is out in the Best Horror of the Year anthology. So like,
that's right.
Horror.
That's why I was very confused. It's just when it's visually depicted.
I think, so I can't control what's coming into my brain. Like if I read, Stephen King or something, and he describes something, I can control how much it's going to get. Whereas like if I'm watching like Blumhouse or whatever that, they control what I get and how I get it and how fast I get it and that kind of thing. So this is how I watch horror movies, and I'm not alone. I've actually talked to many people who do this. The horror movie comes out, right? Like Midsummer, whatever. I obsessively read every review of it, every like blog post, like every like bit of the discourse. And then after it's been out for a week, I go to Wikipedia.
Okay.
I know on this. A lot of people do this. I go to Wikipedia.
I'm not judging.
Somebody has helpfully put up the plot. Okay. And I read the plot on Wikipedia. And then I very slowly, and usually out of order, and often with the sound turned off, watch like snippets of the movie until I've seen the whole thing.
Interesting.
But so Marianne wants to kill me. Like she thinks this is like the worst thing anyone's ever done.
I do have a question.
But we did dress up like Midsummer for Dragon Con like last year. Okay. We did the whole like the white embroidered outfits and the flower crowns and everything. People loved it. It was great. Yeah,
I bet. So here's my question. I
dressed up like the Boy and the Bear.
What's that?
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying, that like that when you're reading prose, right, you have 100% control over it. Mm-hmm. But the visual, the audio, everything is manufactured through you. The timing, everything, like the speed at which it happens, the whole deal.
On a granular level, because you can choose from word to word when you're going to stop.
Yeah. So, and then on the other end of the spectrum, right, is film and television, which controls all the elements. The best you could do is pause or rewind or fast forward.
Or but turn like off the sound, which by the way doesn't happen when you're watching Annihilation, which was one of my favorite books that I read the year it came out. And then the movie.
I didn't really think the book was that scary.
No, I loved the book, but then the movie came out and I was like, I'll just watch it with the sound off. But like the way they did the movie some of the scenes don't make sense with the sound off because it's like it looks like a zombie bear, but then it sounds like they're friends, and it's like super creepy.
Oh, that's very confusing.
Yeah,
I got you.
yeah.
I got you.
This is not middle grade, by the way.
Yeah, no. So, but my question is, what about something in the middle, like a horror comic, which allows you some control, but not as much as
you've given me many of those over the years, and like, yeah, right, like you know, and sometimes I'm good, and sometimes I'm bad. Like I never finished The Sandman.
Oh, really? Is that even horror though? I mean, I guess it's. I would call it dark fantasy, but
here's the thing about horror: it's like comedy. It's really in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's what I learned when I was shopping my horror story that's coming out in Best Horror, because I would you know, like I ended up selling it to fantasy and science fiction, and then Ellen Datlow put it in the Best Of anthology. But I also got rejections because I think for some people they were like, "What's scary about this?" You know, and then like Charles Finlay was like, "I have kids. This story is freaking terrifying." You know, like so it's just it's whether it's what horror is like, whether it hits you. I think comedy.
That's the difference between horror and dark fantasy. Then is that it's a
kind man, I'm not gonna touch that one. Like somebody who's way more, you know, go ask Ellen. I can't.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go back to my grand indifference.
Levels between genres. Like, didn't we say we're not good at that?
No, willfully willfully not good.
What about the difference between middle grade and YA and adult?
I don't know. What is the difference? I will say that the editorial hand is much firmer in middle grade than in any other market. And let's be clear, we're talking markets here. We're not talking genres. Some people have this odd need to describe YA or middle grade as, particularly YA, I think this is where this happens, describe it as a genre. It is not, in fact, a genre. It is a market. It is people buy this kind of thing. But I will say that, so the whole thing with this book is that from the beginning with Hacker's Key, it was already, we went into this with it firmly established that this would be going into the book fairs. It would be going into school libraries. And they're just, when dealing with that, there are certain parameters that you have to work within. I don't know how I would have handled this level of editorial oversight with, say, my adult novels. I think I would have kind of maybe bridled at some of it. But going into it knowing that this was the deal, right, that this was the expectation, I was able to be pretty fluid about it. I mean, there was once in the scene where you were talking about how she takes down that whole bunch of terrorists, basically. Let's call them what they are. They're terrorists. And she takes them all down in pretty cold, careful precision. At one point, there was a whole sequence in which she disarms somebody, field strips their gun, while pondering the history and science behind handguns, which is a very Edith sort of thing to do. And, you know, my editor and I had to have a lengthy conversation about, because there's a huge question there about portraying children with guns. I mean, that's especially a very prescient concern.
That's something that I deal with too, and it's interesting because it's changed. When I wrote Omega City in like 2013, there are guns in that book, and when I wrote Infinity Base during edits, they were like, take any gun out of the book. Yeah. So things have changed a lot. And again, you know, I'm writing these clue mysteries, and everyone knows one of the weapons in the book is a gun. And Hasbro has been amazing to work with. And really one of the only instructions I got was like, no gun.
Yeah, you can't use the gun. Can you even red herring the gun?
I have put a gun in, like I have a mention of a gun in every book.
Chekhov would be very unhappy with you.
I can't use all 6 of them in every book.
I'm just joking. Look, I mean, I'm not Chekhov. I'm just saying he would be.
To be fair, the mention of the gun in the first book appears in the climax, so Chekhov wouldn't have a thing to say. It's not even in the first act. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough.
And then in the second book, it's sort of a nod to, if you remember in the movie, there's a scene where Miss Scarlet shoots the doorknob to open the door.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not Miss Scarlet. It might be Tim Curry. But anyway, somebody shoots the door to open it. And so I have a scene where my character Scarlet is like, can you shoot the lock off? And then the Mustard character is like, that's not how this works. Like
that's not actually a thing that can happen.
Yeah. So my Mustard character, who is he's from military school, so he's the one.
So he would know.
She's like, do you have a gun? Can you shoot it off? He's like, what do you mean? Do I have a gun? Like yes.
Oh yeah, so just walk around with that.
So he's actually, he would be a very responsible gun user, but he doesn't happen to have a gun on him, know, at the moment, because he's just, why would he have a gun? That's weird.
Yeah. No, so I had to basically remove any direct. Ada touches a gun for literally a second when she disarms him, and that's it. Then she just kicks it away. She never holds the gun in any sort of real way.
Guns are tough. I mean, I think that's why Batman doesn't use them, right? He's always like, no gun.
Yeah, exactly. It's Batman's saving grace, really. Otherwise, I don't know.
I think it does make it like, what is it? In Leverage too. The guy who's like the fighter one in Leverage. I can't remember his name. Someone's gonna have to tell me. But
I don't know if I saw that movie.
It's a television show. It's like a heist
or that
show, and but the guy who's like the muscle, he's always so frustrated people have guns, and he just like instantly disarms them, and he's like, these are so boring. They're so boring. Like guns are boring, which is true. Like as a writer, guns are hard. Like, but hand-to-hand combat is interesting, right? It's kind of like
it's hard to narrate. It's hard to choreograph a fun fight scene with guns. Unless, of course, the person fighting them can like actually block the gun.
Unless it's Batman
with their like sword or whatever.
There's that great scene in the first Avengers movies where Black Widow is like tied to a chair and she like disarms everybody. Like that stuff is fun. But like if people are just shooting each other, like no.
It's a little fun in movies, but it's zero fun in books. So. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time here. We got a little sidetracked.
I love when you guys get sidetracked. Thank you.
I have to say, like in the pandemic, like one of my only social things is that I would meet Jon at a park, and we would like walk around outside like 6 feet away wearing masks and like talk about the books that we were writing. Like
we'd each bring our own little lunches, like little lunches.
Pack yourself a little brown bag lunch and go.
And we'd sit down 6 feet apart.
That's amazing. I love seeing you guys like talk to each other about your books through over the years and in all the different stages of those, and how excited you get when there's like a new one and stuff. So thank you guys for talking to each other. My favorite part was definitely when Diana had to explain that Leverage was a TV show. Jon.
You should watch it. It's like a heist.
Go.
Like a heist. They're like the Robin Hood of like heist shows. Like they decide to like steal from the rich and give to the poor.
Where do I find this cinematic masterpiece?
It's a great question.
From Hulu? I don't know.
All right.
Our friend Sarah lent me the DVDs.
There you go. Get the DVDs, Jon. That's how you got to do it all.
So I should ask Sarah for the DVDs, is what you're saying? Okay.
No, because I still have them.
Nailed it. Thank you guys so much, seriously, for being here with us tonight. And just a reminder to anyone who is watching now or later that you can get all their books, their new ones, their ones for adults, young adult, any of them. If you have questions about which are which, please tweet at me or email me. I would love to talk about all of them. Or if you have gift recommendations you want, we can get one for everyone in your life probably. So thank you guys again so much. And don't forget to pre-order. Diana's book 2, which is coming out October 13th, with the wrench. And it sounds like the rope is going to be number 3 based on your research that you're doing.
I neither confirm nor deny the.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
She just tried to get it out.
What is it? What is a Google search even? Who knows? A lot of things can do asphyxiating, right?
Well, no. I mean, the thing is that there can also be more than one murder.
That's true. Very true. And I mean,
the candlestick. No, never mind.
You can't. There's so many possibilities. So many murders. It's not a gun.
Yeah. I really hope the candlestick comes into play at some point there.
I can't wait for the candlestick. Yeah, it's gonna be a big one. So yeah, and the Hacker's Key is out now. Stay tuned for more Marzana. I think is coming in April. Is that the next?
April. Yeah, yep. The Queen of Ismaros.
Love it. Love the titles. Love everything. You were right. The art is amazing. I didn't chime in, but anyway. So thank you guys so much. I'm gonna give you guys a round of applause from here at home. My dog is also giving you a round of applause, so that counts for 2 sets of paws. So there we go. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.